Man well known for being able to speak for yourself, aren't you, John?
That's hopefully true. But if I totally freeze now, you'll know who's responsible. Right, well, thanks very much. And this is going to be a talk on Martin Heidegger. For those who don't know, I'm the cultural officer of the British National Party. So,
Agriculture or horticulture?
never mind, let's keep the blasphemous semi-questions till the end, if we may. Now, Martin Heidegger. Now, this talk, in some respects, is incredibly difficult, because I remember when the elitist sort of Jewish academic George Steiner was asked to do the Fontana Modern Masters on Heidegger, it was because a long series of Oxbridge academics couldn't do it. They basically couldn't reduce the extraordinary complexity of, in particular, this work, Being and Time, to 100 pages, because Fontana Modern Masters, as you know, is a student's sort of quote-unquote cheat primer, the sort of thing that people look up on the internet now. And to reduce Heidegger to that is slightly ridiculous, but you also have to provide a sort of middling and upper middling foregrounding for people to come into the theory anyway. Otherwise they'll be at sea. Now, what people do when they write sort of Times Literary Supplement, never mind Sunday Times articles about somebody like Heidegger, is they basically talk about his politics. They talk about whether or not he had a mistress. They talk about his early Catholicism. They talk about wraparound and biographical matters, because the theory is amongst the most difficult metaphysical theory written in the last century. Probably Adorno and Sartre on the ultra-left, both of whom cross over with certain areas that Heidegger was concerned with. Sartre biographically, never mind anything else, and Heidegger are amongst the most complicated theorists that one can ever imagine. So before we start on this talk, we have to look at what's happened to Western philosophy in the last 100 years. Now, for those who read philosophy at tertiary level in our universities, and tertiary education has been so degraded in many respects through egalitarian discourse that it's almost meaningless. But for those who do, they know there's two great clusters in Western academic philosophy, so-called Anglo-American philosophy and so-called, but essentially actual, European and continental philosophy. We grow up, whether we like it or not, because even the Tony Blairs of this world are actually subliminally influenced by these ideas, in an empirical, naturalist, factually oriented, slightly anti-theoretical current, which comes from our alleged and soi-disant enlightenment. And we come out of, in essentially, an anti-theoretical and an anti-metaphysical discourse, which is why something as unbelievably outre as this is literally outside of British and Anglo-concentric thinking in all sorts of ways. For a long time it was said that Being and Time would be untranslatable, and this wasn't translated until 1962. And don't forget, the book was written in the 1920s, and it's translated by two academics, so it's sort of 2 for 1, with Blackwell's a sort of generalised Oxbridge publisher. Now, what is continental philosophy trying to do, and why does Anglo-American philosophy think it's meaningless? Because these are questions that can't be answered and therefore shouldn't even be asked in a Bertrand Russell and Wittgensteinian way of looking at things. Basically, Heidegger is trying, through semi-atheistic and allegedly secular discourse, to arrive at certain ultimate spiritual truths grounded in pure philosophy and in pure thinking about thinking, even thinking about the thinking of thinking. And he is trying to prove certain cardinal things that in many ways gifted adolescents ask, but often as they sort of often atrophy into adulthood and early maturity, they fall away from. Most people ask, what's life for? Is there a God? Is there ultimate purpose? What is death about? Will anything happen to me that can be acknowledged as existing before I die, that impinges upon this cardinal event? Why are most people completely oblivious to these issues and are terrified and often in a state of mild anxiety if they come up in general discourse? Now, Heidegger is trying to reach real conclusions, grounded philosophical conclusions about these cardinal matters, because he believed that Western metaphysics, and this is an incredibly arrogant statement really, he believed that Western metaphysics had gone wrong for 2,500 years of falsity and inauthenticity in relation to the primal nature of being, which he believes is even a category within the notion of being, which he calls being in being. Now, what's being? The science, quote unquote, of being in abstract philosophy is called ontology. And all of his work is about ontology. Now, this slogan behind me, which Troy has kindly put up, is in part a conceit, because it says Martin Heidegger and death's ontology. Well, you can't really have an ontology of death, but you can have an ontology of life. But his whole point is to place life as understood as concrete being and as phenomena before death. Heidegger is essentially a religious thinker, but he wants to root theoretical and theological energies through pure intellectuality. Why so? Because it is a way into intellectual understanding in the 20th century. Most of the cardinal ideas of the 20th century impinge upon him, and he was taught phenomenology at university by Husserl, to whom Being in Time is dedicated. In the sort of epigraph stroke frontal page, he says, dedicated to Edmund Husserl in friendship and admiration. Black Forest, 8th of April, 1926. Now, many people, sort of undergraduates, people who go on Channel 4 documentaries, would say that Martin Heidegger is an existentialist. And he influenced enormously that school, but in actual fact he's not an existentialist, hence the endless intellectual complication. He's as far removed as that, whilst being tangential to it, as one can possibly imagine. Now, he is a radical essentialist of the most primary and foundational form. Most of the contemporary theory that's influenced Western university professors and other intellectuals in the last 30 years is based on a particular type of existentialism, which is designed in a way to get rid of this sort of material even before they start thinking. The idea is that existence is all there is, and existence foregrounds essence. There is no prior essence. There are no ontological variants which could be said to be true before us. Essentially, there is, put crudely and in some editorial terms, if you can even describe Heidegger in such cultural proximities, they're saying that God is not just dead, but was always dead and was always a mistake. And even the admission of his existence, or partial existence, was based on a question that shouldn't be asked, because it was epistemologically false even in the asking of it. Epistemology is the science or way of understanding how one should think, thinking about thinking, if you like. Because in this type of thinking, before you have a thought, you must, rather like a surgeon, make sure that your tools are all right in order to operate. So you have to think about the thinking you're going to initiate before you even start thinking. Now, most left-wing ideas are based upon the idea that we're a tabula rasa, that we're a sheet of paper, that society is, that you can write upon it as you want and as you will, that we're the product of economics, or we're the product of social forces, or interconnections of the two. There might be a bit of biology, but it's so mediated through socio-economic concerns that it's lost sight of. Certainly, there are no prior truths to us and our existence. Hence Sartre's famous essay, which was designed to bring leftist students, and a whole generation of them, many of whom are prominent in the media now and so on, in the Western world, into a particular type of thinking. He wrote an essay called Existentialism is a Humanism, because ultimately, in a sense, it is. Although paradoxically, there have been plenty of right-wing existentialists. They believe that existence precedes essence. Essence is just an idea, is a ghost, is a spook in the machine, is that which is prior. It's that which all modern theory rejected when the modern world replaced the medieval world. And in some respects, although it's a very crude analysis, Heidegger is a supercharged modern who is a return of radically medieval ways of looking at the world, at meaning, at purpose, at will, and at existence in existence as clarified essence. So in a way, he is trying, scribbling away in this chalet that he had made of wood in the Black Forest to confirm the existence of God, basically. That's what he's trying to do with this enormous amount of theory. When post-structuralism, so-called, became the cardinal intellectual discourse of our universities, pretty much in the 1980s, 1990s,